this is possibly going to be the largest research network within GI when both the partnering organizations are going to come together?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's largest for sure. Very, very exciting. Talking about why we should create the largest and most premium research network in the world, our goal really is to bring clinical trials and the execution of it alongside where clinical care happens today, which is really in the community in the US, and enable that at scale, right? Enable clinicians who want to practice close to the patients, bring cutting edge research close to where patients live.
It just so happens that John had been looking around and putting together a team of very, very bright people for a lot longer than I had been looking. And seems as though he had taken most of those and put them on the team of Iterative Health. And I realized that, well, I think if we put our forces together, and the synergies of 1 + 1 = 3 would be what we wanted to do. And so that's where we started down the journey about 1.5 years ago of wondering what we could do to work together and to help pull these assets to market and ultimately increase and overall improve the clinical care for our patients at the bedside.
Welcome, gentlemen, to the Scope Forward show. Really looking forward to this. Dr. Casey Chapman, Chief Medical Officer for GI Alliance, and Dr. Jonathan Ng, Founder and CEO of Iterative Health. You're here today to make exciting announcement, and I can't be more happy that you're choosing the Scope Forward platform to do so. Over to you.
Thanks for having us. This is exciting. This is a partnership that John and I have been talking about for almost 2 years. And it started really with some what ifs. Like, what if we were to put these two opportunities together? And it was more just jokingly. It had a lot to do with what our hopes were, what we strive to accomplish, but also what the headwinds were in the market. And so as we sat there, and I can still remember where we were, John, when we were talking about this, it was interesting, a lot of the synergies that we probably both believed in, really patients and what we needed to do to kind of help assist our physicians in doing cutting edge research, not just in areas that were known to be cutting edge research entities. And I'll tell you, from the last 2 years to today where we are, and what we're going to talk about today, there's been a lot that's happened, and there's a lot that's happened in the market. And I'll say, there's a lot for us to be proud of, and there's a lot of work for us to do together with GI Alliance and Iterative Health.
John, so formally, can you please tell us what this engagement is about?
I think two leading organizations in clinical research in GI have decided to partner up together to really create a center of excellence for clinical research in the community, between GI Alliance and Iterative Health. We come together and out of strength and are really building not just the largest, but also the most premium clinical research network in GI in the world. In total, bringing together about 80 clinical research sites across the world. So it's such an exciting opportunity. It's something that has been baking for the last 2 years. And as Casey has mentioned, it really wasn't a snap decision, or really wasn't something that we just took overnight. It was a 2-year journey where we got to know each other so well. We got to learn about each other as friends first, share a common love for a common interest, and then shape each other around a common vision for research in the community. And it just made so much sense, and it just had so much excitement around it. We decided to partner.
There are many firsts about this engagement that I see. One is, am I right in guessing that this is possibly going to be the largest research network within GI when both the partnering organizations are going to come together?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's largest for sure. Very, very exciting. I think large here has a couple of meanings. Like, what it enables us to do is not just by the fact of sheer numbers, but also we want to, in talking about why we should create the largest and most premium research network in the world, our goal really is to bring clinical trials and the execution of it alongside where clinical care happens today, which is really in the community in the US, and enable that at scale, right? Enable clinicians who want to practice close to the patients, bring cutting edge research close to where patients live. That was really important to us, right? Enabling that accessibility to patients, enabling the equitable care to patients has been a big theme throughout my career. It's been a big theme at Iterative, and now we found a partner organization that it's a big theme at too. That's why we're so excited.
There's
Yeah.
another aspect that I sense, which is historic, which is to do with digital first organizations such as Iterative and GI practice or a network such as GI Alliance coming together. I think this size of a deal is possibly the largest alliance that has happened thus far. Am I right in guessing that as well?
Yeah, Praveen, I think you're exactly right. I'd love to take a second to talk a little bit about something John said earlier, which is really important to me. And I know it is to our physicians at GI Alliance and to our patients, which is, we are very proud of the fact that we are a large organization at GI Alliance. Size is important for certain things. For some things, it's very important, but, it's nothing without sophistication. And if we don't grow and become more sophisticated and make sure that we stay focused on what we started with, which was our patients, then I think we get off a little bit, if you will, into something that isn't why we started. I will tell you that, one of the things that I spoke about a little earlier when John and I compared notes was we have a lot of researchers who have passion. They want to be innovative. They want to be curious. They're looking for that next opportunity to take science to the next level, and they want to participate in that, which makes patient care better, but it also makes them better physicians because they are looking to drive science for the next physician and for that next patient at the bedside, which I can't ask for a whole lot more as the chief medical officer for GI Alliance. If you switch your focus and you say, hey, we're going to make research nothing but a productive financial ancillary service, we really take what should be the last thing we focus on and make it number one. And I'll tell you, if John and I had sat down 2 years ago and he said, Casey, I'd love the opportunity to talk about what we could do together to make this a financial win, I would have said, John, I think we're probably on two separate pages here. We probably need to, take a step back and figure out if there are common interests. But the nice part is that never came up. It was always about how do we scale research with a sophisticated organization that happens to be really large so we can deliver better care to patients.
So glad to hear that. And I do know that about John. I've tracked his story from the beginning, and it was always about healthcare equity and equitable healthcare for patients. And that's been the theme throughout. So I commend you, John, and both of you. This is truly an exciting announcement. But Casey, I want to take a different angle and ask you a few questions. You were doing this on your own. So why partner with a startup, such as Iterative Health, to do this? What compelled GI Alliance to go in this direction?
If you'll humor me, I'll tell you, personally, and then if you would, we'll walk through kind of from the CMO lens how we ended up where we are today, and very excited about it. In 2014, after being in clinical practice for a couple of years, I started taking over our research locally at my site and really, really started to enjoy it. Understood that this was a passion of mine. One of the really big difficulties was I had to continue to practice medicine and make sure that my patients stayed the focus of my day. And we know that there's an increasing number of chronic disease patients in GI with a decreasing number of GI physicians. And how are we going to scale one of the most sophisticated pieces of comprehensive care with what I just mentioned happening in the background? And so I started talking to different folks and asking them how they did research. What did you do here? Let's compare notes. And I found out that we were all doing it a little bit different, which was exciting because there was opportunities for me to improve. But when you flip that over and you look at it, you go, wow, we've all taught ourselves how to do research out of necessity for our patients, which is the right thing. But, as we know, variability can be the most difficult part of scaling something that's successful. And so years down the road, about 3.5 years ago, I had the opportunity to participate as the CMO for GI Alliance and took over research about 2.5 years ago. And now really had to think about it on scale. Like, all right, Casey, what are you going to do to help physicians with that big question, which is focus on patients and allow the most sophisticated opportunities for clinical research to be part of patient care every day? And we poked around in the market a long time and we looked to see what we could do to scale. And we found some really, really smart people. It just so happens that John had been looking around and putting together a team of very, very bright people for a lot longer than I had been looking. And seems as though he had taken most of those and put them on the team of Iterative Health. And I realized that, well, I think if we put our forces together and the synergies of 1+1 = 3 would be what we wanted to do. And so that's where we started down the journey about a year and a half ago of wondering what we could do to work together. And here we are today with really an opportunity in a market that is very hungry for, I think, a partnership that we have put together to help pull these assets to market and ultimately increase and overall improve the clinical care for our patients at the bedside.
I appreciate, what you said earlier, that this is more than, the finance. This is about taking research to the next level. This is about science. This is about patients. I understand that and I appreciate that. But I also want to bring home the point that the economics have to play along, and that must be important for your respective financial partners like Cardinal Health on your end and the VCs who've supported you on your end, John. How does the business model work and how does the operational model work?
Our focus has always been, if you do clinical trial, it's such a big industry, the drug development industry. And our sense is that as long as you really are focused on the right things, which Casey has mentioned early on, doing the right things for patients. So, delivering high quality care, we know there's always going to be demand for this pharma partners. And that's what Iterative saw initially when we first went on this pathway. Now, Praveen, you were at the very start of it when we raised all that capital back in 21. We raised it on the premise of, yes, it's a big market. We think that technology can make a dent in it, but very quickly realized technology alone won't solve what we have here, won't solve what the problem we have, firstly. And that there wasn't our learnings in the market. We realized that there is a big need to support physicians in this really complex part of care. Right. And number two, what Casey mentioned earlier on, we felt and we know that there's huge demand from our pharma partners to do better in the space, to be able to function more effectively, more efficiently. To give you an idea, for example, the average inflammatory bowel disease trial that is run at the typical site today globally, the average recruitment rate is about 0.6 patients per site per trial per year. So you're basically looking at running a trial at a site. And if you're lucky, every other year, you have one patient enrolled into a trial, right? And then you have these mega phase 3 studies that require, 1,000 patients, 1,200 patients into a trial. And you're doing the numbers and you're like, how long is this going to take to come to market? And you realize that it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. We piloted at a couple of sites. That's when we met Casey. We were saying, hey, we are a technology company today, but we think we got this wrong. We think this needs to be rethought a little bit, but here's our learnings. And here we want to share with you openly our journey. And then we went on this journey together where it's like, how do we support physicians? One piece of it really important, but really, how do we think deeper about this problem? And how do we solve this problem for an entire industry? As we start to solve it, we see pharma, we see physicians receiving this with open arms, being so receptive around, for example, thinking about this in terms of, I would say the closest analogy is value-based care, which is if you deliver so much higher quality, you are able to then ask for part of the slice of that rewards, right? And that's what we're looking at. That's what we're trying to rethink how trials are being done, but also rethink how physicians can participate in the upside in trials, right? Physicians who are not just dabbling, but physicians who are really, really experts, who have taken the time to be experts for their patients, for their pharma partners. How can they participate in the upside of trials? And that's what we're moving towards.
I think over the last 5 to 6 years, we've really looked at what makes up the team that needs to bring these assets to market. I think the interests were a bit misaligned, if you will, and unintentionally misaligned, where we looked at sponsor and we looked at site and we looked at CRO, and they were these 3 independent organizations that existed. But now we understand that we have to align our interests together if we're going to recruit more than 0.6 patients per trial per year. And there's been a whole lot more dialogue. We've had a lot more sit-down conversations across the table about what our interests are. And ultimately, we have fantastic assets, these medications that are going to be, impactful to our patients. But what we all have to do is sit around and align. What do we need on our end as healthcare providers? What does the sponsor need as the one who has the asset in their pipeline and they want to bring it to market? And then, of course, now redefining that a bit, what do John and Casey need with the sponsor so we can create this triangle that's the most efficient triangle that we've ever created, and literally pull those medications to market that we feel from a clinical standpoint are the best in class. So it's a really empowering opportunity for us to sit together and say, let's reshape the market and do it with the patient in mind. So my colleagues in the not too distant future, we hope, can have more opportunities to treat that patient who sits across from you in the exam room and says, what do I have left? I'm really desperate at this point in time. I feel like we've exhausted most of our options. And we should take pride in the fact that we can say, well, I agree. It would have been that way, but we have 3 or 4 more that are coming to market in the next 1 or 2 years that are going to be fantastic for you.
Are there certain primary disease conditions that you're focused on, or is it all of GI?
I'll tell you what I came to John with. I said, John, look, for me and a mentor of mine, Jim Weber, who's the CEO of GI Alliance, he started this mission of making the most sophisticated independent practice possible with GI Alliance. He always talked about, making sure the patient was always first in our journey, no matter what, unwavering. For us, with research, it's very similar, but I will also say that physician passion has to be, if not at the top, very close to the top of the list. And the reason why I say that is because we have to make sure that we deliver that product that is most important to the physicians, because that reflects their patient population and their need. And so when I look back at GI Alliance's research historically, it's really 2 disease states. It's inflammatory bowel disease, which we know that we have an increasing prevalence and incidence today and a bigger need for our patients, but also liver disease. So those really make up about 80% of the combined research that GI Alliance has done historically over the past 3 years. And so I said, John, can you help me here? This is what we need help with. And I think he just smiled and said, well, we have a little bit of expertise in that area if you would allow me to show you what we can do. And so we're really excited about that part as well.
I have one question on the technology side or on the digital side, right? So what in Iterative Health's digital arsenal is unique and that applied to your situation at GI Alliance?
I'd say, and Praveen, you saw us go through this journey where historically, I think, we've thought very much about technology. And when we first launched, I was intent to say that, hey, this technology is going to enable trials and, I want to distribute it to as many physician partners as possible. I'd say over the years, that mindset has shifted drastically. I'd say today, I realized that along the way, firstly, the fundamental thing is we don't need thousands of sites to succeed even at the largest phase 3s. You really need a narrow group of highly dedicated physicians who are very empowered to succeed at these large phase 3s. And so that shifted my mindset around technology, where from wanting to distribute to thousands of physicians, I'd say our technology today is only available to our partner sites so that they feel custom made to the needs of physicians, for example, at GI Alliance, right? Where we're going to build custom tools that they need based on their feedback, based on their engagement, and it's going to feel like a glove rather than build a generic tool that it's aimed at thousands of physicians. Fundamentally, the goal of saying, hey, we want to build the best AM sites out there. Everything we do, from how we engage you on operations to what technical tools we build for you, what AI tools we bring in-house for you, it's all going to be custom fit because we want you to be just the best AM site there is. In order to do that, we really need to be focused. That's, I think, the shift in philosophy at Iterative that we've had in our technology. Also part of what you've seen as, I guess, transition over the last 2 years. This really marks the real milestone in it for us.
That's a telling story for many startups. And, I have a question there, but I'll get to it in a moment. I want to ask both of you actually, when you look ahead a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, and when you look back at this moment and when you look into this point in the future, what does success look like? What does wild success look like?
I've thought about this a lot before we even signed any type of agreement, and establishing a platform that nourishes that appetite for research and sophistication in the community, where we have younger physicians coming in to clinical practice saying, Would you teach me how you do research? Would you teach me why you're so excited about research? John and Iterative's team has done a fantastic job with tech enabling platforms, AI. But the one thing that they have never done is take their sights off the fact that that's all to help our people, our physicians, our clinical research coordinators, to empower them to do what they want to do more passionately and more efficiently. And I think I've watched at many of our sites where we feel like we run up against a dead end, and a lot of our clinical research coordinators, they get frustrated because they want to do more and they want to help more patients. But because they're pulled in so many different directions, they wear so many hats, I feel like we missed that opportunity. And so if in 2 or 3 years we looked backwards to today, I would say that wild success would be our clinical research coordinators and our principal and sub-investigators saying, wow, I sure am proud of what we've done over the last 2 or 3 years and how we've had the opportunity to deliver care in a comprehensive manner as part of daily clinical practice, and ultimately have a lot of other community physicians saying, can you just teach me how you did it? Because this is how we should be doing it.
For me, I think literally a year ago, Casey was generous enough to invite me to the GI Alliance annual meeting. And that's where I first heard one of the core principles, which is really, patients and then practice and then profits. And it really sent shivers. It's so simple, but it spoke to me so loudly around. It was so simple and yet so important to maintain that sense of prioritization that really sent shivers down my back. And, I think what success here would look like in 3 years' time is if we really enable this for the patients and we really were able to, have just create this infrastructure where, because of what we've done, because of what we've enabled physicians at GI Alliance and other physician practices to be able to change GI into call it a destination, the first choice destination for innovation to happen, for drug innovation to happen, for patients who have GI diseases to be the first to access this medicines because we've developed the best infrastructure with the right partnership with GI groups, the right partnerships with our PIs. Pharmaceutical companies are now able to say, look, we have so much certainty in the infrastructure in GI. We should innovate here first, right? We welcome the innovation and welcome that partnership. We should make that investment in this space. And because of that, our patients will be the first to receive cutting edge medicines that really pull forward care, right? It's the future. I think there's so much opportunity here. The one thing I pointed out to Casey, I was some of the NVIDIA team back in December, and then in January, I pointed this out to them. I was like, guys, everyone is investing in this, drug discovery platforms, protein discovery platforms, in AI, but who's really thinking about the infrastructure to bring it to market, right? You can discover 100x more molecules, you can discover 100x more proteins, but today we're stuck at the 1x in terms of infrastructure to bring these discoveries, these really, really incredible discoveries to market, bring this incredible discoveries to our patients. And so I think we need to match the infrastructure with our discovery, what's coming down the pipes, what's our discovery machines, and to say, look, we're ready for you. And we've built this incredible platform that really can engage with you at the right level, with the right amount of sophistication, but most importantly, with the right prioritization.
Very, very insightful. Casey, a lot of companies out there, particularly digital health startups, that might have been in the shoes of where Iterative Health was a few years ago. They would be watching this, listening to this, and thinking, okay, even I want to be in Jonathan's shoes. How do we work with a large practice such as GI Alliance? What advice would you have for them?
The advice that I would have is, what attracted me to the partnership that we have with Iterative is Iterative Health was able to meet the physician needs where we were in the market. In other words, the product was not final. There was no, this is what we do, this is how it's going to work. And if it doesn't work for you, well, then we may not be your partner. It was, we understand the problem. Do you agree that this is the problem? And if you agree this is the problem, then we are fluid enough to be able to pivot, make those changes, and understand that the solution is the endpoint. It's not, where we are today. It's not final by any means. It's the end product is not baked. We know what the ingredients are, but the ingredients have to have patience. The ingredients have to have the sophistication of the Iterative Health platform, and be open-minded and understand that the most exciting part for me was the fact that when I sit across from a patient of mine as a still practicing gastroenterologist and say, I got to be honest, internally, I feel a little bit helpless in the fact that there's a finite amount of opportunities to treat these patients. I need to be part of the solution here. And John's company, Iterative Health, and any company that's looking to be where John is today, you have to bring a solution that's patient first, not financial first to the market. Otherwise, there's a quick end in sight with not a lot of passion, as you can pick up on today's conversation that exists currently.
John, a similar theme, from your standpoint, what advice would you have for other entrepreneurs out there listening to us right now?
To echo Casey's point, I think a lot of it is the journey is about you finding your right partners and really learning how to listen, learning how to listen to your partners. I think one of the things that, as we're discussing how to work together, I think what struck me, because as part of the deal, it's normal, right? You get into all these details and all this what ifs and all these like, oh no, if this goes wrong, what happens? And I realized along the way, and I texted Casey this one, I was like, Casey, I think what's most important here is you feel like you have a partner that you can, when there's something isn't going well with, or you think something might not go well, most important is you feel like you have someone you can pick up the phone and call, and we'll either give you a decent answer or we'll figure it out together, right? And we engage in the right way. And I think that's the most important thing. And we felt the same way too. In my saying that to him, I was like, I certainly feel like you would be that partner for us too. And that has been played out many times over the last 2 years as well, as we've gotten to know Casey. So I think that's what that has given us all this momentum, all this insight to be able to deliver the right processes, recruit the right team, develop the right product to service a very large organization like GI Alliance. I think you have to approach it with an open mind and open heart and have the right prioritization. That's really what really matters here. I think people can see it for what it is.
That's very helpful advice. My final question to you, John, is there are a lot of choices for you to make this announcement. Why did you choose the Scope Forward platform, to do what you're doing today?
Praveen, I've known you for years now. I think your heart is in the same place as ours about patients, about, care. How do you move it forward? It's really, it's evident from your questions as well. Care a lot about how do we empower physicians. And I think because of that, you've become such a respected voice in the GI space, in the GI field. You've also had that same focus as we have. Over the years, it has resonated a ton with me. So I think that's, at least from my perspective, we couldn't have chosen a better platform. And I know I approached you and I said, hey, Praveen, would love to collaborate with you on this. And thank you for having us on the show. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it as well. And thank you for placing your trust on me and the team that does this. So any final reflections or closing thoughts that you have as we conclude our conversation today?
Praveen, I'll say that as we went through this journey, obviously there's always hesitancy and hoping you're doing the right thing. But as we got closer toward the signature, if you will call it that, or the partnership being finalized, I felt more and more comfortable that we were doing the right thing, for the one sheer fact that it was never about tech. It was never about processes or operations. It was always about the people. And we talked about that over and over. And, our doctors at GI Alliance are unbelievably important, obviously, to myself, but also to our patients. And John used the word empowering multiple times during this interview. And that's the entire goal here, is to empower those physicians to be able to deliver that cutting edge, sophisticated care, including research, to those patients, where we can sit back and smile about the fact that we've fought the good fight and done what's right for the patients. And ultimately, that team we talked about earlier, where everybody can win here.
Awesome. Any final comments, John, from your end?
I agree.
All right. No, this has been fantastic. And thank you for sharing what you did. And I wish you and both the teams all the best. This is a historic point, and not just for both your organizations. I think it's reflective of where the industry or the space of gastroenterology and healthcare is going. And it sends a big signal for everybody out there. So thank you for what you've done, and all the best once again.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Praveen.